So we are going to transition now, and one of the things that we'd like to do is if you wrote a post-it in which you had a question that you hope we will answer today, if you can raise your hand and we will pick those up, and then we're going to allow you to stand for a moment while we bring all of our presenters up to be available to talk together and also to answer your questions. So stand, stretch, and also produce your post-it. So let's take a 1-minute stand and stretch.
My name's Betty, and I'm one of ISA's program managers. Most of you probably know me from LinkedIn or from other places. We won't mention, hint, 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 hint. That individual knows who I'm talking to, but we'll leave it there. What we're going to do at this time is I've collected questions from some of the people in the audience, and it's going to be pretty much informal. I promise not to ask them any hard questions because you already have. So we'll take a few and they'll elaborate on that, and we'll just take it from there. The first question is, what role does career and technical education serve in the school reform process in your school? So I think before we talk about in your school, I'm going to start with Dr. Stephanie, and let's just talk about how career and technical education. She's smiling at me because when I say briefly, that means this is not a dissertation response.
Okay, and she'll kick me because I'm next to her. All right, so one of the things I talked about this morning when I was describing the work of ISA is that we work to customize our partnerships with each of the schools and districts or states that are interested in learning about our model. We are not a one-size-fit-all. We are not off a shelf. We are not coming in and claiming that if we just worked on your advisory schedule that you're going to hit all of your outcome goals. We really believe it's about digging into the data and understanding the different problems, and then we customize what we do. Some of our schools and districts are very interested in CTE. Some of them are actually CTE programs. And in those situations, ISA has done the same thing that we've done that you've heard about. We've identified coaches who are experts who are working with those schools to help them either develop, design, transform, or continuously improve their CTE approaches. So we do have lots of examples of work that we've done in CTE, but it's at the request of our partner. So it's about partnership.
Thank you. So in Ohio, from a state-based perspective, could you talk about CTE and some of the programs within the state in your school district?
Yeah, so we actually, Ohio really is trying to push for our high schools to actually provide pathways to career tech education, and actually to graduate now, if you have a credential, it actually points towards graduation. So they have actually recognized, which is great, that pathway for our scholars to be able to use career tech to be able to graduate, not just test scores. And so the way that we envision in Cleveland Metropolitan School District around this work is we really want it to be driven by the school. And so if they feel and they hear from the scholars that there is a pathway that they would really like, then we will work with the state to create that pathway. Some pathways we just can't create overnight, and so we do have a career tech high school with manufacturing in it. That building was $68 million, so you just can't, build it overnight in certain areas. So we tried to think about partnering with our Tri-C, which is our community college, so that with College Credit Plus, they're actually able to take those courses there and then get their core curriculum inside the school. And so we try to think through partnerships so that we can provide a variety of options to our scholars.
Dr. Brown, earlier you did mention in your slides some of the CTE programs that you have in your building. Could you just elaborate on just one?
Well, I would like to speak more about our digital arts program that we recently began last year, and so we added a second year of the course this year. So one of the things I'm most proud of in regards to our digital arts program, the students that you typically see that aren't demonstrating those successes academically, they are certainly experiencing those successes as a result of our digital arts program. We held a digital art gala toward the end of last year. And some of the students that you noticed that may have been our behavior issues or maybe not have experienced some academic successes, they were so proud of their work, their exhibition, being there to stand to talk about their work really made my heart smile, because they too deserve to experience such successes. So our digital arts program are second to none. We have a wonderful instructor that takes students who have zero understanding of digital arts and moving them to a point where they're actually creating products and beautiful artwork that we have placed all around our building. So we're very proud of that. That's one of the things I'm most proud of, is our digital arts program.
Thank you. Let's transition over for a moment into social emotional learning. Dr. Brown, could you talk again? And I think, according to this question, the question reads, how do you address student apathy? So let's look at and think about how your school or your staff addresses student apathy in the building. As it, I guess it could be as it relates to classwork, school involvement, student engagement with the curriculum.
All right, as mentioned before, we do have advisory classes that our students go to every day. Each advisory teacher has roughly 12 to 15 students, and that is the person, that's the student's advocate. That's the person who brings them up in kid talk. That's the person who helps to develop a plan to help support students. So that's certainly one way that we work to support our students from a social emotional viewpoint. In regards to our counseling services, I mean, she also works toward that, but I would say the most powerful pieces that we have right now is our advisory program, how that person works with the team of teachers to come up with a plan to help support students.
Thank you. I'd like to talk to Dr. Michelle about how ISA has helped the school district, specifically our school, Glenville in Ohio.
Yes. So I think the biggest piece is the focus around instruction. I think the part that we were really struggling with was like consistent coaching with our teachers. As I shared, the fact that we created the 80-minute block of support for the teachers and the professional learning, we were just like, we need content experts, we need people who are really able to have conversations with our teachers, because our children are on a huge spectrum of learning and achievement. And we didn't want our teachers to feel deflated, but we wanted them to feel empowered. And so ISA has really helped us to create a culture of learning for the adults, and how to have conversations with each other about, like, what am I struggling with? What am I successful with? What am I wondering about? In a way that allows for people to trust each other. And then we had really struggled with that. And so they have come in and created structures for the administration to be able to help them, and then work directly with our teacher teams to be able to do that, that conversation level, so that they are really thinking through their instruction every single day. And also then finding success and celebrating it so that we can have the quick wins over and over and over again.
Thank you. Dr. Stephanie?
Yes.
I think I know this, and some of our members are real aware of this, but I'd like to make sure that everybody in the audience is really clear on what ISA's mission is. So I'd like for you to point out specific populations that we are focusing our work on.
Sure, and I also want to touch on what we just talked about, but I'll do it together. As I said at the beginning, we are focused on underserved and underprepared youth. Our partners are 99.9% urban high schools. We happen to have one BIE school, Bureau of Indian Education School, which is rural, but all of our schools are, for the most part, urban high schools, which is why we decided to feature Cleveland and Jersey City today. And I think just to piggyback, our mission is to make certain these young people are ready for college and careers. Not or, they're ready for whatever they choose to do next, and that means that we have to think about the academic preparedness around college preparatory curriculum. We need to think about the relationships piece, because again, the brain scientists are saying it's not too late at adolescence. This is the next burst of brain activity, and that we can, through the relationships, the academic support, and the engagement, change the trajectory of young people who may have struggled all the way until they got to high school and are entering behind. The other thing I would say about us is that when we begin a partnership, the first thing we do is learn more about the school or district we're partnering with, and we do a college readiness assessment. And during that process, we have surveys of kids that they take online to answer questions about what their thinking is about how they're learning or not learning, or what they think they're good at. We also have a process through which we're talking to community members, we're getting input from teachers, and the leaders. We really want to walk in there and be able to understand what's the mindset of the teachers and leaders, how are the kids feeling about the environment in which they're in, do they feel supported or engaged, or do they feel like we have high expectations for them. But we want to pull all of that together and with our partners determine what are we going to work on? What are the priorities that we're going to identify for right now? And you've heard the journey. You know, we might start with one problem and then keep tweaking, and then we might choose to add or to modify as we continue to make these places where the district and the schools that we're working with are outperforming other schools that are comparable both in their district and in their state.
Thank you. Dr. Michelle, this question is going to be directed to you, so I thought I'd let you know in advance. Okay. In our audience, we do have some policy people and some representatives from the state office and funders. So my question is, what advice would you have for a policy person who's working on policy, say at the state level or at the federal level in the area of a whole school reform?
Yeah, so that's a very loaded question. So I'll try to answer it. So I think there's a couple of components, and going back to the ISA model, I think people always think about teachers when they think about whole school reform, and they think about maybe leaders. However, I think when you know about turnaround, I think we forget about the scholars and their families. And so you don't usually hear a lot of policies or funding towards social emotional learning. And so when you think about the communities that we're working in, whether it was rural or urban, everyone needs supports. And so how do you create policies that are open enough to take in a variety of supports, but also thoughtful about the whole child? And so you will hear a lot of people talk about the whole child, and then there's tons of funding for teachers, and then there's somewhat of funding for leadership, and then there's like a minute amount for children directly around social emotional learning. And so when we're creating policies or expectations, I think people need to think about, if we are really thinking about the whole child, how we created a system that actually supports, either through time, talent, or treasure, the whole child. And so I would say that to policymakers when you're reflecting on your policies, and funders when you're thinking about funding and supporting organization, does that take into account all that children's needs are and the community around them?
Thank you. I would like to acknowledge and thank our representatives from higher ed, Bowie State University, Howard University. Did I miss anyone from another university in the room? So with that said, I have a question for you guys. The question is, in your school and in your school district, how are you best preparing students for college? You can speak concerning academics, or you can speak concerning them deciding on college majors, and also socially, how are you preparing them to make that transition from the nest to the big world out there in college?
I would say for Innovation High School, we have a Jump Start program at 9th grade. Before students start their school year, they go through a Jump Start program. And so their initial visit is to a college. So our second day of the orientation program is held at our partner university, NJCU. And so they provide a tour, provide lunch, and just an overview of the college experience. So that it's right in the face of them when they first start. So that's where we begin. And then from that point, we offer a number of opportunities for students to actually take courses. So they're already getting the college experience because they're actually enrolled and receiving college credit for attending our partner university. Also, starting in 9th grade, we have students enrolled at HCC, which is Hudson County Community College. We also have students, all of our students that are taking science, biology 9th grade, they are also going over to the campus and utilizing the lab facilities available over at NJCU. So they are certainly getting the college experience from day one. But beyond that, we, as emphasized in the video, we engage students through project-based learning, problem-based learning, so which encourages the collaboration, which is truly needed to work in today's world. They must be able to think and reflect on their thinking. The critical thinking is not the traditional setting at all. So if a teacher is traditional, they couldn't survive at an innovation because you have to think differently, you have to plan differently, you have to engage learners differently. So, and that's the teacher we want to attract, which is the teachers that we have. So, but we're very proud of our work. And again, we're always discussing college. They're going on visits. They're going, I'm like, where are you going now? But they're always going somewhere to keep it there. This is where you're going. Yeah. This is the destination for you. Of course, you may have some that decide later on that's not their choice. However, from day one, we are keeping it at the forefront. They understand what the expectation is for them, and we help support them in that.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Dr. Stephanie in 1 second to elaborate on ISA's mission towards that, but I'm going to warn Dr. Smith from Bowie and Dr. D'Souza from Howard, my alma mater, that you both are going to ask a question, and I'm going to bring the mic to you. Okay, so I'm forewarning. Okay, Dr. Stephanie.
Yeah, so college going, again, that is why we were founded, was to close equity gaps between the experiences and opportunities of young people who are in urban high schools. And so there are a couple of things that we've talked about today, but one of the things that we focus a lot on is mindset in our work, both with our adults and thinking about how to get young people excited, engaged, and to change their thinking about schooling, particularly because many of the students we work with may not have had as many positive schooling experiences. They may be behind, they may feel deflated. So some of that is how do we think about getting our energy and our interest back up in academic environments. It's through inquiry, it's through advisory, it's through the relationships. It's really through people talking about college as an option, not saying, well, you're just gonna go get a job at X or at Y, you're not going to college anyway, so why should I invest in you in talking about college? And then the last two things I'll say is that for us, it's also about showing them that they can do this work. And if we have the kinds of teaching that we're hearing about at Innovation in Glenville and in Cleveland, in which teachers are helping young people learn how to problem solve, how to think critically, and how to persist when something hard is placed in front of them and they're not giving up. We are preparing them for that. And I do know that some of our schools also make it a point that you will not leave this room until you have completed the application for Rutgers. You will not leave this room until we know that you have the information you need to complete a FAFSA, right? So it's the system, the support, the nag, and the nudge. That's how we're getting our kids to college. And we have tracked some of our students who've gone on to college. We have tried to learn from things like the Posse Foundation in terms of if we've got more kids from ISA high schools at X campus, Are they more successful because they have kids from their community, even if that college isn't near their community? So we're constantly trying to think about college, 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 and choice if you choose not to go to college, but you're going to be ready if you're in an ISA school.
And just to add to that, we're in our 4th year, so this is our first year having seniors, and that is the expectation for all of our seniors to apply to NJCU. Whether you go there or not, you have to apply to NJCU. And part of the reason for that is since they are our partner school, students that qualify academically, they have a free ride. So we want to make sure that they're at least applying. Even if you choose to go to a Howard or a Harvard or wherever you choose to go, the expectation is all of them apply to NJCU. And their NJCU is actually coming next week to do instant decisions. So that is the expectation.
That's great. So my question for Dr. Smith and Dr. D'Souza, since you are out there in the field on the front lines receiving our students from high school, I want you to talk a little about some of the challenges that you're facing as we bring our children to you, well, our young adults to you. So I'll start with Dr. D'Souza.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to say something. I'm Jason D'Souza, and I'm Associate Professor of Higher Education, Leadership, and Policy at Howard University. My 20-plus years in higher education has not always been in faculty. In fact, the bulk of what I've done has been a provost, a chief academic officer, a VP for student affairs, enrollment, retention. So I've kind of run the gamut. And there are quite a few challenges that I see, but it's not at the high school level or at places like innovation and other places. I think a lot of it is us as well. The reason I asked a question about social as a starting point is because the data that I've seen, not just at the schools I've worked at, and all of them have been historically black colleges and universities, to include Tuskegee, Clark Atlanta University, Savannah State, Morgan State, those kinds of places, is that first-year students, particularly males, are the ones that are more likely to violate Title IX sexual misconduct. And so I want to know if there's anything that's being done at your levels to prepare students to talk about what that means when they get to college. Are you teaching like what that word no means when they visit on campus? The other thing is that I really enjoyed seeing that male program. And I started one when I was at Morgan State University. It's still running now. That was back in 2004. One of the problems is that males, as you know, especially African American males, have the poorest help-seeking behaviors than any other subgroup on college campuses. And so I want to know if you're doing anything to encourage our African American males to take what you're doing in your schools, and they're wonderful things, and saying, hey, when you get to college, seek out supplemental instruction, seek out tutoring, go to faculty offices, those kinds of things. And the last thing is this, I'll say sorry. It's like 20 years of all pent up stuff. When I was in enrollment, two things in enrollment, two things. One is, I noticed that one school in Maryland, I'm not going to say the name of the school where I worked, there are two colleges in Maryland where I worked. It was important for us to recruit students from Baltimore. I'm not sure if anybody's from Baltimore, city public schools or not. I'm not here to throw you under the bus because I lived in Baltimore for 12 years. But one of the things we noticed is that about 90% of the students from Baltimore City that came into our institution for planning, in other words, for creating schedules and those kinds of things, had to take Acuplacer. And 90% of them placed in not college level algebra or college level math. And so they started at the bottom. And so that was like a big concern, 90% of them. And the last thing is this, I like the idea, especially in Innovation High School, that it's going to Hudson Community College and New Jersey,
City University.
City University. I should know that because I'm from the Bronx. I think those are excellent choices, especially given what our chief academic officer from Cleveland said, that many of the kids in the program come from urban areas and are probably very high on the Pell eligibility level. And what I think is very troubling for me in higher education is when we take our high school kids on college tours to HBCUs and perhaps other places, and we know if they have a high Pell eligibility, they're going to probably get the most money, but yet they take them to places, very good schools, like Hampton and Howard. That's like $30,000 a year. And the gap between the costs and what financial aid pays is like huge. And so it's almost like immoral to like take them to those schools, and they're there for 1 year, then they can't finish, and they have a $12,000 balance.
Right.
And they're stuck because they can't get a transcript to go to the community college or another school.
Yeah.
So that's my maybe pent-up concerns, and I don't know if you have any suggestions about that.
So I actually have a couple of responses to you. So a couple of things that we're doing in Cleveland that we're really excited about. So one, we have something called Closing the Achievement Gap, which is focused on our males of color, our brown and black, African American and Hispanic males. And what we do is we identify our scholars in 8th grade who are struggling, who have the attributes to not graduate from high school and or go to college. And in 9th grade, we have something called linkage coordinators. And what they do is they do a boot camp with those scholars in 8th grade in the summer. And in 9th grade, they work with them every single week on key things about being a man, actually. And they have lock-ins, and like I attended a lock-in, and they had to like introduce themselves to me. They had to ask me questions and do it in a polite way. And our fraternity brothers came out and supported them in these things. And it's a deep support system that we do for these young men of color in their 9th grade. We're really proud because the boys that are in that program, almost 76% of them actually graduate on time, and over 50% of them go directly into college. So we wish we had linkage coordinators for all the kids because we see the impact of it. But we actually work on those components there. The other part is we have something called the Higher Education Compact. So we work with our state universities and then 43 colleges around the Northeast Ohio. And we actually track key things, like we track our persistence rate, we track where's the gap in what our scholars need for tuition and things like that, so we can have data to know what do we need to support them with. I know that Innovation High School talks about Naviance, so all of our scholars in starting in 6th grade start putting in information in Naviance. In 8th grade, we have a program called True to You, and every single 8th grader gets a mentor who talks about college and career, so that when they select their high school, they're starting with the end in mind. Where am I going? And last but not least, we're working on something called Say Yes to Education, which would help us with the last dollar component in our higher education. And so I think we're trying to be much more thoughtful, because we started to see so many kids come back after the first year and say, I can't afford it anymore. And so we really are trying to plant the seeds much earlier, think about supports for them in their first year. But now that we're graduating more scholars, which we're so proud of, we're now thinking about, like, how do we get kids that normally did not think about college, think about careers and college much more faster than they did previously.
Thank you. Next, we're going to have Dr. Smith, Professor Dr. Smith from Bowie State University, to speak about some of the challenges that you're seeing with us transferring our students over to you in their first year. And next, I probably think I will give an opportunity to maybe 2 of our principals in the audience just to talk about some of the challenges that you see when you are preparing those students to go off to college. That could be in the area of academics, it could be in the area of financial aid, it could be in the area of socially and emotionally getting ready to leave you to come to Dr. Smith and to Dr. DeSouza, okay? All right, Dr. Smith.
Okay, thank you. I'm Professor Barbara Smith from Bowie State University. And I really enjoyed the discussion and the dialogue, because many of the things that we talk about as we come together to see how we can be supportive and help, you've kind of touched on here, so that lets us know we're on the right track.
Yes.
So that's a good point for us. I think that one of the challenges that we look at continually is we have students who are first generations. So that's, for us, that's a big deal. We want to make sure that we know who these students are, because this is their first opportunity, their first entree into college, their whole first experience. And often they're coming to us from schools, and they still don't have a clue really as to what that entails when they're coming to college. So it's very helpful for us to hear some of the things that you're doing to make that transition a lot easier. And it coincides with some of the things that we think also are important and that we're focusing in on. It's important to give them the extra experiences and to let them know ahead of time what this looks like. So I'm very glad to hear that students are able to take courses on the university campus. And we often invite students, and we also pair with them. I'm in the education department, so we look at these high schools that are around us and other high schools that may have education clubs or future teacher clubs. And we want to invite them to work with us. So we pair with them. We'll go to their schools and we'll talk to their students and share in their meetings and invite them on our campus to share in our activities. And we also try to bring them in and work so that our students will serve as mentors to them. And they will be able to work with them and see things that they can do to make it an easier transition and give them encouragement. And we're always doing that and considering them and letting them know it's doable. It's doable. And we're here to help you, and that's the whole purpose. We're partnering with you. It's not a situation where you have to face this by yourself. So because they are first generations, we also know that parents sometimes need more information and more structure than normal. And so we try to put that in place to make sure that we're being helpful to them. Because often they don't know what questions quite to ask. They haven't had the experience, so they don't know exactly what it is. And sometimes they will come to you and say, well, I want my daughter to come here, or I want my son to come here, but I want to know what you're going to do. What does this mean? What are they going to have to go through? And so it's an opportunity to share with them some information that they may not have had and to do some planning, because we want them to know it's not just, oh, we want you here for now. We're planning for the future. Preparation for life is what we talk about. And we think that that's an important way to not only bridge the gap with them, but set in place some milestones for them as well, because that's important, that we look at where they want to go to, as you say, build their future with doing something in life that they're going to feel good about and be very positive with. And on our end, it's the teaching. So we will see you all in many facets because it's the teachers in the field that make the difference.
Right.
And I like what I've heard about your schools and your experiences. And I do have a question for you at the end as well, to find out a little bit about how we can work together to give our teachers, our student teachers, our interns, even more opportunities to have those types of experiences, to engage in your schools and to work together to see how we can work out and how we can best serve our student populations. Because that's I think it's what it's all about. It is in the hands of the teacher, and it's in the hands of the preparation that make the whole thing work for the students. That we are very passionate about ours and who we're putting out there. And it's important for us that they see as many opportunities and horizons as possible. That's what we think our job is. And I think we do a fairly good job of that with the results that we get when students come back and they share. So I'm really pleased about the things that I've heard from you and look forward to a visit.
The bus is leaving at 3:30 for Cleveland and New Jersey. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to briefly hear about some of the things that are going on in the local high school level. I think I have two high school principals in the audience. I have one that's a brand new ISA school, and I have another that's visiting. So what I would like for you to make a comment about is some of the challenges that you're dealing with in preparing students to enter higher education, some of the successes and really some of the challenges, because we really are talking about reality here.
Yes.
And you know, that's what we're working to do, and that's one of our missions. So I'd like to start with one of my principals that I know, with Ms. Jackson from Overbrook. And can you turn around to the camera?
And tell them who you are.
Yes. I know you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Yvette Jackson, and I am the principal of Overbrook High School in Philadelphia. I was start by saying that I'll start with my challenges to get to my successes. Starting with my challenges, I think it's really our students having a voice, understanding their mean, and the importance of who they are in their process. One of the challenges for us is getting the teachers to be able to actively have these conversations with students so students feel comfortable in asking questions and using their inquiry. I believe that my students has felt for a long time that they haven't been able to express themselves in that way. So when they begin to ask questions, it's almost an aha moment for the teachers, as well as it's them still seeking who they are. And through that, I think we find ourselves dealing with some of the things in which you said at Howard, with the challenges in which you face. For our young men to be able to have conversations not only with their teachers, because a lot of times they don't have it at home. So we need to ensure that we're in the school having those conversations. Through ISA, that advisory group is so important to begin to develop that. But for our teachers, they have to have a comfort level to be able to have those conversations. So the coaching for our teachers is something that we are really working on and trying to enhance so that they can. Through that, we also note that we have to go to outside means to begin to support our males in that way, and to look at our students and have our students have that understanding of what they can afford and how they can move on. We often discuss with them plan B, because the grandola is plan A, but where you're going to go may be where you're going to be come that September with plan B. So we definitely have those conversations with them and keeping it as real as possible with our students. For our success, some of them are getting it. Some of the teachers are beginning to open up and beginning to have those conversations and make those connections with our students. We know that making connections with our students is the key, because our students are needy for connections. We also know that as soon as they begin to make grasp those relationships, that they will understand that I cannot do, I can do, I will do. So we take pride in seeing that coming along, but it's a process. And through that process, I'll just like to kind of say to Dr. Brown, real quick, I had a question. First of all, I wanted to say to you that it was wonderful to quickly see your classrooms and to see the level of engagement with your students. Also, just a snapshot of your classrooms to see the level of student work that was on display, to see that that takes a teacher that is invested within students. And I noted that in 16-17, you made the game to begin to switch your students' performance around. And I guess I wanted to just ask you quickly, what specifically did that within that year? Because that was such a drastic change from the year before.
I would say putting structures in place. When I arrived, there were no structures in place. And I say that with how I developed the master schedule to, you know, what you value is what you make time for. So when I created the master schedule, I think Priscilla was like, you did all that? You did, you know, you remember coming to my office? But the key is to make sure, when I developed the master schedule, it was to create an alignment between our schedule and NJCU, which is the reason for our lengthy classes and the days of the week we have classes. But also in developing the schedule, I wanted to ensure that grade levels had common planning time together, that content areas had common time together every week for at least 60 minutes. Most of the time they stay for the whole 75 minutes, but at minimum it's 60 minutes. And during those conversations, it's very focused, it's very intentional, it's with purpose. We're discussing a plan for students all the time. We're making our lessons better all the time. we're always focused on the work. And I think they would agree that we leave there exhausted, but we know our work is so important, and we just want to become better at it. And I would say specifically is putting structures in place that did not exist, was kind of minimally what I did. However, putting key people in positions, for example, like I mentioned before, we created team leaders, department leaders, having a key person to help facilitate the work, because again, I'm only one person, can't be everywhere all the time. But I did meet with those individuals to develop like the focus, like what is going to be our focus? What are we going to work on today? What is important for our work? And I think having that collaborative process with the team, their feedback is valued. They know they have a voice. We encourage our students to have a voice. They know I use their feedback sometimes. Sometimes I don't, but most of the time I do. Because it just makes our work get better. And that's the goal, is to kind of get better at what we do. But I would say putting structures in place. And specifically with the assistance of ISA, we created a writing plan, which became focused, intentional, and everyone played a part and role with it. So I would say that certainly contributed to the growth that we've seen.
Thank you. Also, Bowie, we could just do it like a pipeline to Philly so that we can make some, because I need some teachers.
I'm sure we can facilitate that. All right, I'd like to put on blast my school district from Petersburg.
Good morning. I'm fighting a cold, so please forgive me. My name is William Wynn. I'm the proud principal of Petersburg High School. I've only been there since July, after being in North Carolina for the last 16 years, but I had the opportunity to turn around 2 high schools in North Carolina. My colleague from Ohio, it was nice to hear you talk about Glenville. Petersburg is a very similar area in terms of the challenges. A former tobacco area, everything was based on industry and manufacturing. All those jobs are now gone. And so there's a lot of desperation in Petersburg. And so as the principal of Petersburg High and the only high school in Petersburg, we're really working with transforming Petersburg High School. So we operate under the idea of #transformation Petersburg High School. And so I'm fortunate to have some of my staff members here with me, and we're really working on getting buy-in. My question was the question about student apathy. One of the things we run into now is a lot of desperation. Why go to class? You know, everybody will hang out behind the gym. Why go to class? Well, if I'm gonna go to class, what am I gonna get out of the classroom? Bowie State, Howard, we need teachers, because we're relying on virtual teachers. We're doing a lot of virtual classes for our foreign languages, and many of our hard areas, we have virtual teachers. And our kids come to me every day, can I have a person in the classroom? They want to talk to somebody, not talk to the TV. They want to talk to somebody. You know, we're doing one-to-one with technology. Can I have a book instead of a computer? So, you know, we're moving forward in the 21st century, but we're losing back some of the key values, things that we came through on and that our kids want. And so how do we make the transition between where we are and where we need to be?
Thank you. My next and last question would be to Dr. Stephanie.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to end with your statement concerning what the audience and other school districts should look forward to from ISA in the future.
Thank you. Recovering from the statements of our friends from Petersburg, I would say we want to tell the story of our schools. That is why we call this The Evidence is Out There, right? A lot of times organizations are doing good work with schools. A lot of school districts have partners, but the real evidence is what happens in the schools and what happens most importantly with the young people who've been in schools in which they've had a strong partnership that is focused on the academics, the relationships, and on the continuous improvement process, so that these are young people who are ready to have a choice at the end of high school, of college, and or career, or both, and they're ready for everything. So I think what you can expect from ISA is, I've already said to my friends from Philadelphia, we're coming to you next. We want our schools to tell their story. As a person who's worked at the local, the state, and the national level, and also in state offices in more than one state, a lot of times we are using the guidance and the policies that are coming from the federal government or from our own state boards and trying to implement it in a way to support our lowest performing schools. But it's hard to manage all of the different needs. It's all about the specific needs of schools. There's no model that's going to fit every school, so you have to have partners who are nimble and adept at understanding and forming a partnership. That is why we presented to you today 3 different schools. One, Bronxdale High School in the Bronx, could not be here today because they're actually hosting Philadelphia to come and visit their schools to see what this model can be in a school that's been on the journey since 2012 and has completely rethought how to support the academic and social emotional needs. We then wanted Washera here because Washera is in a school that we started. We helped that school think about how do we design a new school in which students have opportunities to be in these environments. And then we wanted to show you a newer school in Cleveland in which, even in the short period of time that they've been with ISA and with the hard work that's happening with educators in these schools, you saw that Glenville has received, what's it called?
The Momentum Award.
The Momentum Award. They're not done. They have a lot of work to do. All of our schools have a lot of work to do to ensure that every single student is successful. But with good partners who are working with you closely and listening and learning with you and pushing you and supporting you, because this work is exhausting, we have an opportunity to have a different story about urban schools. The narrative is often pointing out our inadequacies. We're on lists, we're publicly places that people assume there are so many problems that there aren't also positive stories, and we're here to tell you that's not the case. We are working with students and with educators who are committed in communities that are struggling in many cases because of economic and other environmental factors. We don't let that be an excuse. We are always about equity and outcomes for young people, and what you will hear from us is I hope you'll join us as we go around the country showing places that are doing this work in ways that are changing the lives of young people, in which the educators love being there. Retention rates of adults and attendance of adults in ISA schools tend to be higher because people like being there. They're learning, there's inquiry, there's relationships. So I do hope that today at lunch, which we're going to feed you, you will take an opportunity. If you are sitting with people you traveled with, I encourage you to make some new friends.